Greg Rasmussen was born in England but came to Africa as a young boy. For the past 12 years, he's dedicated himself to saving a rare species of African dog on the brink of extinction.
I've always been passionate about wildlife from day one. I mean, even as a child, I love the bush, I love Africa. It holds an endless fascination. I mean, it's always changing, and there's just so much to learn. It's like a book that just never ends.
Greg is one of the few pilots in the area, and even though he's busy with his own project, he's agreed to help a fellow conservationist search for a lost rhino.
People very concerned about the rhino, and National Park said, would I assist? And I said, of course I will. If wildlife needs help, I'll help.
Greg's a capable pilot, but flying a plane and tracking animals requires intense concentration, and he'll be flying over unfamiliar terrain.
And I was aware of that, I was fully aware of that, but we had rhinos that needed locating. There were poachers out there. I mean, you can't turn your back. I can't turn my back on things like that. This was a very harsh, dry, rocky, rugged area. I'd never flown that area before, and I realized I was in a completely different territory.
The rhino is electronically tagged, and in no time, Greg's tracking device picks it up.
I just found it. I hadn't actually seen it, but I realized that it was alive by this movement signal. And I was just starting to circle out. And as I turned the plane, suddenly I went into something known as a wing storm. Literally, one wing's flying and one wing isn't. Suddenly I had this gut-wrenching feeling. I put full power on the rudder. Pulling back on the stick, I was doing the right thing, and it wasn't working. And the plane started to go down in a spiral. And the ground was coming up pretty damn fast. And then there's a split second. You know you've passed the point of any return. I almost didn't want to open my eyes. I didn't know what I was going to see, what I was going to feel, what I was going to find. I was totally dazed, stunned. And I was like, I'm alive. I'm alive. And at that second, petrol started dripping over me. And I just pulled myself out, literally almost fell out of the plane. As the petrol started to come down, I had these visions of this wall of fire. And I could just see myself being incinerated alive. And I knew my legs were doing nothing. I couldn't do anything with the legs at all, but I just had to get away from this plane. I mean, this thing was a nightmare now. And then I suddenly thought, Mayday. I've got to call Mayday. And I didn't want to go back to that plane. I didn't want to go near it. But I had to brave it, because I knew that that was my only means of survival. The pain hit. the adrenaline had worn off.
On the outside of his body, Greg has only a few superficial scrapes, but inside he is bleeding badly and his legs are broken in 6 different places.
That was a pain that I'd never experienced before. Anything like it, anything that even came close to it. My legs felt like they were going to explode from within. My feet were just doing this. My legs were just one big lump of jelly. And I realized I had to stay in control. You know, I had to be in control of the situation, because if you lose control, that's it. I was going to be a goner. I started to try and take stock of the situation. And it was quite a harsh reality. I suddenly realized there was no 999. There was, you know, if I was going to get out of this, it was only going to be me and me alone.
Greg is over 70 miles away from the nearest road. By the time anyone realizes he's in trouble, it may be too late. The brutal heat of the African sun will bake him alive.
Because I'd got these boots on, yeah, and of course there was no space for the swelling to go. There was no way I could even get anywhere near my shoelaces. But I was thinking, if I don't get those boots off, there's going to be gangrene, and I'm going to lose my feet. I lose my legs. I managed to look back, and I thought, well, maybe if I can drag myself to this tree, I can tilt my body forward so that I can maybe get to my shoelaces somehow. I wanted to stop that pain. Because, I mean, it was like my foot was exploding.
Fate is being cruel today. The closest tree to Greg is a thorn tree. But as its thorns dig deep into his back, Greg realizes they might be useful.
And I managed to just break a twig off that was about a foot long, and it got a hooked thorn on the end of it. And I lay there and I could hardly focus. There was just so much pain. I started to pick the shoelace. I thought, well, this is all I've got. And I remember I had a little flashback to childhood, because I was always absolutely useless with shoelaces. I then realized I had one chance. If I pull and the knot doesn't spill, then I've blown it. That's that foot gone.
Greg manages to loosen the shoelaces and get them both to the same stage, but nothing happens.
I had to remain as focused as I could. And I picked and I kept on picking until I finally got to the point where the shoelace was free.
Loosening his boots isn't having the effect Greg expected. The pain is just as bad because his feet keep swelling up to fill the newly expanded space. He has to try something else.
And as I pushed and I bit, this stick was just rotten. It was full of termites. And my mouth was now even drier than before, and I went, but I pushed with such force. The shoe came off. And I just forced the other shoe off. And lay there. And I looked at my watch.
In the heat of the midday sun, the temperature is now over 100 degrees. Greg hasn't had any water for over 24 hours, and his body is rapidly showing the effects of dehydration.
It was hot and it was dry. There wasn't an ounce of moisture in the air. I hadn't drunk the whole day because an elephant had destroyed the water pipes in our area where I'd taken off from. It wasn't like feeling thirsty at all. It was almost like being tortured. Everything was just so dry, and your skin just didn't feel like skin anymore. There was no texture to anything. You know, you tried to touch with your tongue to touch the roof of your mouth. It just felt like it wasn't there.
As Greg lies out in the open, a vulture, quick to sense a meal, lands on a nearby tree. With the temperature now hovering at 110 degrees, Greg is literally frying in the sun. As he drags himself towards the shade of his downed aircraft, his thoughts turn to other dangers that threaten his life.
Being in the bush for so many years, you get to know absolutely every single noise. You know every footfall. You know which footfall belongs to which animal. I was terrified that maybe something would come and sneak up on me. And I couldn't do anything, you know, I mean, I couldn't run. And then I heard elephants, a whole herd.
It is in fact an entire herd of elephants, and they're moving right towards him.
And I thought, they've got to sense that I'm here. If they detect you at the right moment, that's fine. If they detect you too late, that's the scary bit. Because then you're in their attack distance. And I thought, if the wind is wrong and they don't detect me until the very last minute, that's when I'm in trouble. And then suddenly there was this huge screech of... And I remember just thinking, oh no, please, just don't stampede. And I just had this absolute fear that I'm going to be trampled.
Greg has dodged a bullet. The herd moves on away from him. But within moments, Greg has a new worry. He hears the sound of an animal walking nearby.
It was lion footfall. And I listened very, very carefully, and it was getting closer and closer. And then I heard this call. It was a lioness. And lionesses have a very distinctive call they use when they're calling cubs. And obviously, because she was a mother with cubs, that makes her far more dangerous.
Greg knows that animals in the wild have a unique defense strategy. They make sharp, sudden noises to scare off their enemies. As the lioness moves in closer to Greg, he knows that creating a noise at the right time is his only defense. When he finally sees the big cat's silhouette, he makes his move. With daylight fading, the search pilot will soon have to return to base. There's still no sign of Greg or the wreckage.
I heard the plane. And then I started to get almost excited. And then I thought, no, I'm still a needle in a haystack. They had an area to search of about 1,000 square kilometers. And I wanted to scream, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. Hello! Hello! I almost wanted to will the plane in, you know, come my way, I can hear you, please. Hello! And then there was silence. I remember that silence now so well. It was killing. Nothing is going to happen now until tomorrow morning, at the very earliest. And I've got to start thinking about the night. And of course, as a biologist, you know the night is always a dangerous time anywhere. At that point, there was this total silence. I could hear my heart sort of boom, boom. It was that silent. And it made me very conscious how totally alone I was. All I wanted now was for that night to end. I had this nightmare that a hyena was going to come up behind me. I know what hyenas are capable of. Bone crushers, as they're also known. They've got the most powerful jaws of anything. I also know someone who was carted off by a hyena, and he was a fully able-bodied man, but he was sleeping and they dragged him away. That was the biggest scare of the lot, that a hyena might come up behind me. I was terrified to even think about going to sleep because I knew that I wouldn't wake up again. That would be it.
Then Greg's worst nightmare comes to life. Once again, he recognizes an animal by the sound its feet make when they touch the ground. He hears a hyena.
And I thought, it's coming behind me. And it's going to come right in the worst spot. It's going to come round the back, which is where I really had absolutely no control.
Once again, Greg uses his knowledge of animal behavior. He grabs hold of his stick and gets ready to hit the plane with it and create a noise to startle the beast.
And I waited until it seemed like forever. I knew if something came one step closer, then would have meant that I'd failed. Then I heard this, like, just footfall, just getting less and less and less. I remember lying there at that particular point thinking, is there anything else that's going to be chucked at me? You know, what else is going to come? You know, what other brick's going to come down?
Greg does his best to stay positive. In 1 hour, the sun will rise and he will have made it through the night. But it is one very long hour.
And then I heard these footfall. I can't describe. Of course, I knew what footfalls those were. And among them was Peter. And I suddenly looked and I couldn't believe it, that was him. I couldn't even speak to anybody. And people were just saying, what happened? And I just had to say, wing, stall. And that's all I could say.
It was really overwhelming. He'd survived. And it was sort of affirmation of my belief in him.
The feeling that I wasn't going to die was just indescribable. I'd fought this and I'd won. And somebody came up, I hadn't got a clue who it was. Someone put their hand on my shoulder and said, "You're in safe hands now."
Since the accident, Greg has undergone more than 100 operations to save his legs. Through grit and sheer willpower, he has learnt to walk again. The crew were shooting the end sequence for the big-budget Hollywood thriller Sliver, in which a helicopter seems to descend directly into the Pu'u'o'o vent. Legend has it that the vent is home to the most powerful of all the Hawaiian gods, Madame Pei. And local superstition dictates that you pay homage to her by dropping a bottle of gin into the volcano, ensuring that no harm will come to you.
Well, Chris had the bottle. I yelled to him, I said, "When we get over the volcano, I'll tell you when to throw it in."
Chris, you set? Yeah. Now.
And he did kind of a wussy throw.
The air coming up out of the cone is pretty turbulent, and it caught the bottle and it kind of blew it back out, so it didn't actually make it in the cone.
You totally missed. How could you do that?
The crater is about 2.5 miles across. I mean, it's like hitting the Pacific Ocean. I mean, it's huge.
He thinks it's funny. I don't really find it that funny, but
So my comment was, well, that's okay, she'll get the idea.
Even though the offering hasn't been received, Mike, Chris, and Craig go for a take.
Okay, Craig, let's line up for the crater.
Craig lowers the helicopter as they skim towards the edge of the crater.
And rolling.
even a couple hundred feet up in the helicopter, we could feel the heat coming up off of it. It's incredible.
As we arrived near the edge of the crater, we would tilt the camera down and zoom to create the look down, the drop down into the crater.
And cut.
Okay, Craig, take us down and we'll review that. Let's have a look. Okay.
I noticed that the length of film was real short. It was only like 3 or 4 seconds.
Nah, it's not quite there.
You want to see it again?
Yeah, sure.
I thought it was a good take, but obviously when you're making a movie, we'd do a second or third take in case there's any problems with any of the other takes.
It's the ego that we all have to make the perfect shot, to put something on film that nobody else has done before.
Now, let's go try another one.
You feel when you're filming that nothing's going to happen, that you're encased in this piece of metal of a helicopter, and that it's kind of a safe zone. There is always the element of danger, but I've been doing it long enough that we never felt that we were putting ourselves out on a limb or anything. I get more concerned about the traffic in LA than I do about the traffic in the sky.
Okay, Craig, for this next pass, I want to try and take it a little lower and a little faster, if that's all right.
Roger that.
We weren't doing stunt flying. It wasn't any acrobatic aerial work. It was pretty straightforward flying.
And rolling.
It might have seemed straightforward, but as the chopper passes over the crater rim, it experiences catastrophic engine failure.
The first thing to hear and feel is the RPM decreasing. Usually in an engine failure, you have a quick deceleration. This, it was just kind of slowly spooling down.
What's happening?
There's a sound that beeps. I'll never forget that. The beep, 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 beep.
At that point, we're in kind of a whiteout where the plume comes up out of the cone.
Oh man, no way.
And then the next thing he said was, we're going down. And that's something you don't want to hear a pilot say ever.
Sierra Hotel, engine failure, going down in a minute. Hang on!
You get about a second or two of recognition, and then you go right into the emergency procedures. What made this one challenging was the choices I had to make about where to land.
I really didn't understand totally the emergency procedures that he was conducting. I was just thinking, are we going to die?
By a miracle, Mike, Chris, and Craig survive the crash, but their troubles are just beginning. They're surrounded by deadly pools of lava and choking in toxic gases.
I wasn't even really sure where we were. I didn't realize we were inside the cone, inside the crater.
You okay, Mike? Chris? Yeah,
We looked each other over, and Chris was fine, I was fine. Craig was the only one that had a laceration over his eye.
You're bleeding! What? You're bleeding! I'll get the first aid kit.
Fortunately, we missed a steam crater by a couple of 100 yards, and we missed a lava pool. So of all the places in the volcano, it was probably the safest place, if you can call it the bottom of a volcano a safe place.
The crew is on the crater floor in a thick cloud of VOG, a poisonous mix of carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and hydrogen chloride. If they don't get out fast, they'll suffocate.
It had this terrible taste. When you go to take a breath, your lungs would burn. We're thinking that we've got to get out of here because we're going to have a difficult time in trying to get any fresh oxygen.
We were probably about 50 yards from the existing lava pool, and it was hot on our feet.
You'd hear it bubbling and gurgling and spitting.
We realized when we're looking up, we're inside this crater. Oh my God, we got to get out of here.
I'm gonna try the radio. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Can't get a mayday out. There's no power.
The helicopter's electrical system has been destroyed in the crash. With no radio to call for help, climbing out is their only chance of survival.
We kind of explored going to the north, but that was near the live part of the volcano, and the air was really horrible that direction.
Hey, this isn't working. Let's try climbing up.
All three of us were in excellent physical condition. We thought that we could scale out the 300 feet and make it to the top to get back to safety.
The inside of the crater is like a bowl, so it's less steep at the bottom, and then as it goes to the top, it gets steeper and steeper until it's basically a 90-degree cliff.
The first 100 feet or so were pretty easy. After that, it became deadly treacherous.
Ah!
If you've ever picked up a volcanic rock, they're just sharp like needles.
As you pull up on it, it starts to crumble and break away. As we're doing this, you're hot and you're sweaty from expelling all this energy.
Chris manages to claw his way ahead of Mike and Craig, but he's now on a near vertical cliff face.
Eventually what I found was a camera battery. The camera that we were using uses a 24-volt battery, which is the same voltage that the helicopter electrical system uses. And I had just a pocket knife, but I was able to cut the end off of the battery cable, spread the wires, and strip them down. And using the camera battery, I set that inside of the helicopter and then used the normal plugs to wire into the overhead panel to get the electrical system to work the radio.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is 2 Sierra Hotel. Can anybody hear me?
Craig's repeated mayday calls are interrupted by scrambles for fresh air.
I'd have 3 or 4 breaths at a time where I get no oxygen at all, and it was just gasping. I then waited probably at that point in and out of consciousness.
There, I see you.
I was able to get on the skid, and I believe with probably the last ounce of energy I had in this earth, I was able to pull up and get into the backseat of the helicopter. And Don, he was now pretty wide-eyed because he had just gone to the brink of his own life. Because he'd had 10 minutes of, I would dare say, the worst flying that any pilot has ever had in the history of flying.
Mike! Mike! What's going on?
For Chris and Mike, it seems like the helicopter rescue has been aborted.
The helicopter was getting stronger and stronger, then suddenly started to fade and fade until it disappeared, and we heard nothing.
The temperature inside the volcano begins to plummet. Mike and Chris are now in grave danger of succumbing to hypothermia.
It's starting to get a little cooler. It's cold. Our throats were constricted, and it was hard to talk.
I thought we were going to suffocate if we had to stay in there overnight.
As well as having difficulty breathing, Mike and Chris are also suffering from dehydration.
I would take my light meter and I'd turn it upside down and I would gather the moisture that was coming down. It tasted like sulfur, and it was just a vile, disgusting taste.
As darkness sets in, Chris has given up any hope of ever seeing a rescue party.
I was soaking wet, and I was shivering. I wasn't even sure the rock I was sitting on was stable and that was going to hold me all night.
Finally, the rescue team returns. It's a crushing blow. Mike and Chris will have to spend a perilous night in the volcano.
The feeling as the sun was going down was that was probably the last sunset I was ever going to see. It was really difficult to breathe. It was really difficult to keep my eyes open for more than a few seconds at a time, so I just kind of made a little tent out of my sweatshirt and just tried to breathe, shallow breathing.
Mike and Chris have survived a terrifying night inside the Puuo vent, clinging to the unstable crater wall. They are dehydrated, exhausted, and are suffocating in toxic gases. Their lives depend on the rescue team returning.
Mike was the voice of encouragement. He kept saying, "Don't worry, everything's gonna be fine. They're gonna come get us." So I kind of relied on him for that kind of support.
Bottom line is that I possibly caused his death because I was the one that told him, "Come on, jump in the back of the helicopter and go for a ride with us." We're sitting there and just waiting and waiting and waiting.
The rescuers had left some cones in a trail, so I caught onto that. And I came upon their base camp where they had stayed that night. But nobody was there, it was empty.
The unpredictable weather has not only stopped the rescue mission, it's forced the team completely off the volcano.
I tried to drink water, it wouldn't even go down my throat because my throat was so swollen. It was almost swollen shut. There were oxygen tanks with masks, so I immediately put a mask on, and I just figured I would hike until somebody found me or I'd find the highway or something.
It's a 5-mile hike over desolate terrain, but Chris has an amazing stroke of luck when he's spotted by a passing helicopter.
Hey! Over here!
As soon as they grabbed my arms, my whole body went completely limp. Like I almost fell over. They had to actually carry me from that point to the helicopter. My body just shut down.
Chris tells the rescuers that Mike is still alive, but the extreme weather conditions mean they can't make another rescue attempt today. Mike Benson is facing a second night in the volcano.
I was by myself, thinking that I'm the last survivor of this horrendous ordeal in this volcano. And I kind of just gave up hope for a while. I just thought that the only peace that I would get would be if I just passed away quietly. The biggest thing I think about is, why is my skinny little butt sitting here? I can't believe that God put me on Earth to die in the volcano. Is my ego that big that I have to go back and say that I have to do take two because I want take two to be perfect? But no, I've got to make it better. And with that, endangering myself and my comrades. I started to see Madame Pele, and it was in profile. It looked like she had long flowing hair. Probably around 3 o'clock in the morning, I felt like that there was nobody supporting me, nobody around. My life was coming to an end. So I took a rock and etched on the side of another rock, this big, huge rock, in fact, I love you, Stephanie. I just felt that the end was coming quickly and that there wasn't any other reason to live.
Having survived a helicopter crash, Mike Benson has spent a second night in a live volcano. Both his colleagues have escaped, but Mike believes they're dead. 2 previous ground rescue attempts have failed, so Mike's film company hire another helicopter pilot to attempt another radically different aerial rescue.
Helicopter comes in, and they were just dropping this net down and just poking it around to where they thought I was. The second time I saw it was like 10 or 12 feet, and with that, it got lodged on this big, huge rock, and it got caught up in the net, and they thought it was my weight that was in the basket, so they powered up. I'm thinking to myself, oh, they're never going to come back. This time it's like about 10 feet, maybe 9 feet in front of me out in the middle of space. And with that, I just jumped into the net. They felt my weight on it, and they gave full power and took me up. could see blue sky above me, and I could see some edges of the volcano. And as we were going past, I remember yelling back to Madame Pele, "I won, you lost."
Believing that he is the sole survivor of the crash in the volcano, Mike Benson is flown to the base camp to be reunited with his wife, Stephanie.
It's so hard to describe, to see the people that you love. Then out of the group, I see Craig come walking in, and then I realized that they hadn't died.
I came over to greet him. He was pretty dumbfounded and amazed and happy that I was okay.
I just couldn't believe that he survived another night in that pit.
I was so glad to be alive that I could literally have run a 5K. I had this much adrenaline being pumped into me.